Martina Bacaro. Martina Bacaro is a PhD student in philosophy, science, cognition, and semiotics at the University of Bologna. Her research focuses on human-robot interaction from a philosophical, epistemological, and semiotic point of view, with the aim to elaborate an embodied and an active explanation of meaning processes in HRI. She's involved in Horizon 2020 European Project Taylor and in European Project AIDA, Artificial Intelligence Doctoral Academy. In 2021, she published with Luigi Bacaro the article, What is in the Mirror? Of Mirror Self-Recognition, Semiotics and Material Engagement in Reti Saperi Linguaggi, Italian Journal of Cognitive Sciences. Martina, please.
So thank you so much, Maria, for your presentation, and thank you, of course, to all the organizers for the invitation. And in my talk today, I will try to draw a line of research concerning the human likeness of robotic faces by adopting a cognitive semiotic perspective. The question, why do robots have faces, could seem an odd one, even naive. In fact, ever since the first attempts to build artificial mechanical agents, robots have always been provided with a face, whatever the purpose of the robot. Even before robotic engineers achieved the possibility to make robots able to perform facial expressions, faces were naturally implemented in the design of robot architectures. In the picture, you can see the robot Electro, one of the first humanoids built in 1938, whose most popular ability was smoking cigarettes. In some, it seems quite obvious that robots, human replicas par excellence, have faces. What I want to stress today is that considering the resemblance of robotic faces unproblematic to human appearance is equivalent to underestimate a key factor to understand what occurs in interaction between humans and humanoid robots. In the context of this symposium, this issue seems to me that to bring an interesting test case to be analyzed, and we will try to support this idea through some semiotic considerations on the nature of robotic faces, taking up the challenge Massimo Leone proposed for a semiotics that is studying the effort to simulate human intelligent behaviors through non-organic and non-human devices. So, are there some possibility to understand the ways in which robotic faces affect our relationship with them? Let me begin by saying that there are at least two ways for answering this question. The first way, more direct and simpler, is proving that providing robots with human faces allows humans to interact with them as they do with other humans. There are several studies indeed that testify the more the robot's face look human-like, the more the interaction with them will be smoother, resulting in humans being more cooperative and open to engagement. As highlighted by Blow, Doughton, and colleagues, faces are the focal point of any humanoid robot, allowing designers to embed sensors in the place they know humans would be directed. Moreover, facial expressions are widely used as feedback mechanisms in interaction, easily understandable by humans. A face can present visual cues to help the user understand the robot's capabilities. Clearly presented communicative features will encourage intuitive interaction. In addition, the design of the face can give clues to individuals about the skills of a robot. A 2-year-old face suggests a 2-year-old cognitive and interaction abilities. For example, Broadbent and colleagues reported that users preferred a healthcare robot that displayed a human face over one without a human face. Thus, equipping robots with a face is a fundamental step in the design of the robot, which is intended to interact with humans on a daily basis, even in unsupervised context. In short, the question, why do robots have faces, can be answered simply by referring to studies that certify the effectiveness of human likeness features in robots for eliciting human-like interactions. However, things are more complex than that. In fact, an entire field of studies testifies for the non-linear correlation between human likeness of artificial entities and likability towards them. Following what is reported, the likability of robots increases when their resemblance to human increases, until a point beyond which the human likeness displayed by robot elicits a nerve feeling, Something disturbing is experienced, and this sensation leads to the human to avoid the interaction with the robot, sometimes even being frightened by it. As we all know, this phenomenon is called uncanny valley effect and was conceptualized in 1970 by the Japanese roboticist Masahiro Mori. In those times, robots were not at all human-like as they are today, but even if Mori's intuition was based only on imagination, his thought is proved to be right today. Here you can see the picture representing a robot built in the 70s that is shaky, built by DARPA, and one of the most popular Android of today, Reply Q1, built in 2005 by Hiroshi Ishiguro. In a similar article, Bukimi no Tani, Mori drew a graphic to explain the correlation between human likeness and Shiwankan, then translated as familiarity, affinity, or valence. Here you can clearly see what Mori intended when talking about uncanny valley. There is a range of human-like appearance in robots that provoke a collapse of emotional balance in humans, a descendant which can be climbed only going through eeriness. I'd like to shed light also on the fact that Mori designed two curves, the first for describing the relationship programming still entities, and the other, which is made by the dashed line, for describing the trend for moving entities. Actually, Mori did not talk specifically about robotic faces, but the relevance of this part of the body was underlined in several studies and addressed as one of the key factors in inducing the uncanny feeling. Although also familiarity, or what you see here expressed as affinity on the vertical axis, would deserve to be problematized from a semiotic point of view, today our focus is on the horizontal axis, which is the one that represents the increasing of human likeness. Here it is where our investigation starts today, and we will attempt to show the semiotic answer to our problem about robotic faces. In essence, what we are going to do is to see how in the human-robot interaction literature, human likeness is treated as an objective and quantifiable trait, which relates to the quality of the object and serves as an objectifying coordinate to describe the appearance of the robot. And then, even if not formally made explicit, this conception of human likeness reveals a conception of perception that is summarized in the process of bringing under rules, with human likeness being considered as the given role against which the robot humanness must be compared. So let's begin by looking at two studies. After the translation of Mori's article from Japanese to English, the field of studies of uncanny valley effect exploded, raising curiosity about the possibility of objectively measuring the human likeness. The first study reported here is maybe the most popular about the assessment of human likeness for non-human faces. And Cheatham and colleagues designed an experiment in which stimuli from morph continua with controlled differences in physical human likeness between avatar and human faces are as endpoints were presented. One of the main hypotheses of this study is that the principal cause of the uncanny valley effect is a mismatch in categorical perception. They claim that the reason why discomfort arises in correspondence to that range of human likeness is because the individual has difficulties in discriminating whether the entity is human or non-human. Specifically, there is a category boundary that works as a turning point. Before that, faces in the picture are recognized as non-human. After that, faces are recognized as human. As they stated, the ability to discriminate between physically different stimuli might not be the same at all points along the dimension of human likeness, with enhanced sensitivity for objects closest to the category boundary. And following this idea, the uncanny valley should arise exactly when looking at picture coming from the middle of the continuum, when there is a doubt concerning which category between the two should be chosen. For testing this hypothesis, in the first study, one of the pictures from the morphing continuum was randomly selected as a stimulus, and the participants were asked to identify the stimulus as either an avatar or a human. And for the second study, participants received two pictures, and their task was to decide whether they belong both to the same category, avatar or human, two different categories, avatar and human, or if they were the same picture. The results, however, did not fully validate the hypothesis. They found that there is more more uncertainty in evaluating some pictures, but those pictures were not correspondent to the category boundary. Indeed, the higher degree of uncertainty was found shifted forward within the human category. This result forced the researchers to find a better interpretation, suggesting that this investigation demonstrates that the definition of the dimension of human likeness in terms of the degree of object similarity to human appearance does not reflect the way in which human likeness is subjectively perceived along this dimension, and that the general conception of the dimension of human likeness should be revised. The second study I want to mention starts its investigation by considering previous failures in standardization of human-like dimension, and Phillips and colleagues noticed that the few quantitative assessments typically treat the concept of human likeness as unidimensional. This has led, in their opinion, to very different robots being considered as equally representative of the same category, as demonstrated, for example, regarding the robots all labeled as humanoid in the experiment of Stenzel, Wies, and Melzoff, that are these on the left. To overcome this issue, they elaborated a collection of appearance features to use as standard evaluation parameters in detecting and assessing the human likeness of humanoid robots. In this taxonomy applied to assess human likeness, features from multiple dimensions of robot appearance were considered, such as eyes, eyelashes, head hair, and skin. And based on this systematic correlation among these appearance features, they identified 4 dimensions of human-like robot appearance: surface look, body manipulators, facial features, and mechanical locomotion. To prove the efficacy of this method, they created the ABOT or anthropomorphic bot robot database, in which more than 200 humanoid robots are collected and rated for their resemblance to humans. However, even if the aim is admirable, of course, I found that unfortunately they failed in discriminating robots by referring to these parameters. Indeed, as we can see in the screenshot, from a simple search indicating the score of the parameters, we find that at the same score of human likeness, that is 50, body manipulation, surface look, and face, that is 100, very different robots in terms of appearance and human resemblance are listed. How is it possible that, how is it possible that Milo shares the same category with Nadine if we talk about human likeness? And Caspar, that is much more stylized in facial traits, could be considered as human-like as they are. Evidently, even if multidimensional, this grid is still not sufficient. In sum, I argued that these studies fail to account for a quantitative measurement of human likeness in robots due to the conception of human likeness they adopted. For all of them, the only way to go on in this research is to find the ultimate definition of human likeness, finding its pure essence in order to discern human from non-human entities, to list all the features which enable human likeness to be as such. A precise metric is needed to compare different robots on a common scale and allow researchers to replicate findings with robots of equivalent human likeness. This is a quotation from Phillips and colleagues. In other words, namely semiotic words, they are trying to build an objective type for interpreting the tokens. Indeed, in these studies, we can find a classic and a strong idea about recognition and recognition work. Here, the researchers start the investigation thinking that there is something like a unified concept of human likeness, which has precise semantic features that drive its detection. They think that by appealing to abstract meanings of the concept, people will be able to discriminate entities and build a continuum of human likeness, reaching a statistical correlation with the already established stereotypical concept. The category of human likeness is then deliberately built from a purely abstract concept and its traits selected among cultural representations to be representative of human resemblance. The question guiding their inquiries, more than how human likeness of robotic faces can be assessed, seems to be why cannot we reach an agreement on what human likeness means? I think that semiotics can answer both questions, but I think I want to face the second one before, starting from the results of another study that are quite significant. So can I have a glass for everything? So here, Lukowski and colleagues try to assess how well people can evaluate degrees of human likeness for computer-generated characters, and whether every subject involved can choose the same robot as typical for a certain category. Thank you. Which were robot, android, zombie, avatar, and human. Hence, they choose 3 representations for each category, the ones you can see in the current picture, and ask people to assess their human likeness and to pick one among 3 to be the most representative for the category. The authors showed to be very surprised when neither the first nor the second study was validated. In fact, for the first study, people did not place the items following a common scale of increasing of human likeness as they supposed they would do. Conversely, researchers said that each participant elaborated his own scale, which was dependent on his idea of human likeness. Similarly, in the second study, none of the items reached the consensus to be the most representative for its category, showing also here an individual and idiosyncratic way of detecting human likeness. The results led the researchers to say that this kind of inquiry must be an integral part of the investigation of uncanny valley effect, since there is no way for them to set an objective scale following standardized parameter, and then it should be assessed for each study. These studies testify that there is no possibility to reach an intersubjective agreement on the evaluation of singular entities on the axis of human likeness. The attempts to establish a universal dimension of human likeness as a category result in repeated failures. From a semiotic point of view, we know from Paolucci that there are at least 2 motivations. The first is that the process of bringing tokens back to type is not representative of the way semantic meanings are understood. The assumption of the human-robot interaction notion of human likeness are that signification processes are universal, that meaning has a general nature, and that sense attribution consists in following the path that links occurrences to the roles. What we find in the conception of human likeness outlined here is a vision of cognition based on semantic meanings as a process of bringing tokens back to type, but the type here, that is human likeness, eludes definition. However, as Paolucci states, it is never the case to find occurrences to trace back to universal categories, and universal categories do not enable us to interpret what we are facing. When we are handling meaning in text, practices, or experiences, we are never dealing with something that is equally valid for everyone, but with something that demands to be valid for each one individually, and that is given to each of us as something that is uniquely our own. This is a quotation from Strutturalismo Interpretazione. Hence, from this point of view, the studies we mentioned before do not surprise us when they fail in validating their hypothesis. If the aim of their inquiries is assessing human likeness as something universally known, generally accepted, intersubjective valid, and semantically built without any previous agreement among individuals on that, the researchers will always be disappointed. Lukowski and colleagues seem to realize that when they suggest to build a classification of human likeness for each individual involved in any study of uncanny valley effect, everyone indeed has his own idea, experience, concept, and vibrance of human likeness, which must be assessed individually if the correlation between this variable and the emotional balance elicited has to be found. A clarification is due, however. This individual singularity of the concept, this exclusive property that is given to us as our own, is precisely what we have in common. And here, we come to the second part of our analysis. The fact that it is not possible finding a universal rule does not mean that it is the chaos or poor intuition that is responsible for human likeness. Indeed, although each of us in this room could have potentially a different conception of what human likeness is or how a human-like entity should appear, we will probably agree that the chair I'm sitting on has a very low, maybe none, degree of human likeness, while the robot you have seen in the picture I showed was quite human-like. Things become more difficult when the decision is between a number of robotic faces, and the higher the number of robots, the higher the difficulty. This is because meaning is attributed by stabilization and regularities rather than by archetypes that define the occurrences and roles that bring them unequivocally back to concepts. In our quantitative example of robotic faces, the regularity that cuts across the encyclopedic plateaus and informs our discriminative abilities is found locally. Stabilizations and regularities are not something general and valid for everyone in the same manner. They are something activated based on conditions, context, and references, features that altogether constitute what is given to each of us as something uniquely ours. Again, following Paolucci, we stabilize meaning according to different intersecting patrols that always depend on the situation at hand, the skills involved, and the local dynamics of the stereotypes and semantic constructions activated. The concept of type is wiped out and replaced by the locally selected organized portion of encyclopedia, which is activated not based on the roles, but on regularities that are levels of stabilization enabled and selected in the online process of practices. The reason why every subject in the last experiment set up his own classification of human-like entities is due to the way in which semantics work, and has nothing to do with the adherence of a given type. At this point, two preliminary conclusions can be drawn. So there is no possibility to set out defined categories and identify one single class defined by semantic traits that can work as a tool. In fact, we have seen that it doesn't work both for a semiosis aquem, in which designers are trying to build human-like robots, as shown in the second study, and for a semiosis aqua, in which individuals must categorize robots, as shown in the third study. But let's assume that, hypothetically, we accomplish the task of mapping all the possible already existent robotic faces, and that will allow to find a mean in terms of regularity to locally and temporally as well define a precise ratio of human likeness. Does this mean that we have fully understood its meaning? Does it entail that the golden rule to define what human likeness has been discovered? I'm afraid that it will not be the case, because something that's being constantly left behind in these approaches, whose focus is to perfectly define meaning in terms of semantic features, namely experience. As highlighted also by the first study by Cheatham and colleagues, if we expect that cognition is exhausted by a logic and categorical form, we should at least explain why the result of the first experiment shows that the negative emotional valence and the maximum cognitive effort in discrimination has been detected not for images in the middle of the pool between human and non-human, but in the ones closer to human. Actually, experience has its own logic, and it is not the symbolic categorical one. Humans are capable of other kinds of understanding, which are different but not disentangled in comparison to the one constituting compositional semantics or inferential logic adopted by the studies. Cognition is not only about symbol manipulation, categories, and rules. It entails an aesthetic level that has its own logic. It makes hardly any sense to carry on with a notion of human likeness based on a model of cognition disentangled from individual experience, and which seems to not even pay off. Well, what I'm going to do now is then to replace a compositional cognitive semiotic approach with an experiential cognitive semiotic one, In order to account for this dimension of meaning, a dimension that based on the pragmatic occurrences resulting from experience, which guarantee the possibility of recognizing objects, faces, people, concepts, emotions, sensations, but which in turn is modified by the way the experience is given, not only on a conceptual level, but first and foremost on a bodily level. In order to accomplish this task and rebuild the concept of human likeness based on experiential cognitive semiotic account, I will rely on two principles that constitutively define a cognitive semiotic perspective for us. The first being the inactive relation between perception and cognition, and the second being the pragmatic dimension of meaning. So, concerning the first, the cognitive semiotic perspective built on an activism as developed by Paolucci conceives cognition and perception as two faces on the same coin. Basically, perception can be said to be a kind of cognition, as well as the reverse. The division between the two in this framework fades out. Indeed, if the standard cognitive paradigm, perception is the level of collected inputs and cognition is the level of the modality through which the inputs are processed, in this new account, perceiving something means an act and morphology. Perceiving something is always perceiving it under a certain respect or through a modality. Moreover, in the process of shaping what we perceive in a certain way as significant, different instances intervene that come from our personal experience, from our previous interaction with what we have dealt with, from the ways in which we are condensed the norms of the encyclopedia into our behavior and temperaments. It is exactly here that we can find what is given to each of us as something exclusively ours. There is some semiosis in perception, not because perception has an inferential nature per se, but because we always see something as meaningful under a certain respect, which is selected idiosyncratically. It means that whenever we perceive anything, we are perceiving it in a kind of modality which allows to see it as it's done. This shift is relevant for our discussion today because it allows not to disentangle perceiving a robotic face and judging it as human-like. Indeed, when we see a robotic face, we contemporarily see its human-likeness, and right away its face appears to be meaningful for us in a way that we are going to see right now. Indeed, something is yet on the table. How to account for the experiential dimension of meaning we saw was missing in previous experimental accounts. Again, following the cognitive semiotic perspective, replacing the semantic conception of meaning with the pragmatic one will help in considering how faces mean interaction. So what is meaning for cognitive semiotics? Here we take the definition given by Peirce, so that to develop the meaning of something, we have simply to determine what habits it produces, for what the thing means is simply what habits it involves. In other words, this means that to know the meaning of something, we must be able to look at its pragmatic effects on interpretation and to identify the habits that it activates. By adopting this definition, we are already accounting for the experiential aspect of meaning, highlighted by the notion of habit. When we talked earlier about regularizations as processes of semiotic stabilization, we were referring precisely to the role that habits play in the formation of interpretive behaviors. The process of perceiving ends up in setting disposition to enact what have been called embodied expectations, that are characteristic pattern of agentive response enacted in correspondent similar situation of interactions. In Paolucci's word, habits are exactly what make possible to perceive the future in the present and anticipate the world we are expecting. If we bring this consideration back to our investigation of human likeness, perceiving a robotic face as resembling a human involves the inactivation of patterns of action that are interpretive habits located at the body level. What happens when I see a robot face is that, along with this face, I also perceive all the possibilities of action carved out of that context in that moment by my agentic possibilities and not beyond the bodily constraint that bind me to life. The pragmatic significance of this recognition results in the creation of certain expectations in interaction which can be fulfilled or disregarded. Together with its eyes, I see the possibility of looking each other. Together with its mouth, I see the possibility of having a talk. These considerations lead also to further implications concerning both the conception of human likeness and its relation with the investigation of uncanny valley effect. On the one hand, the quality of the linkage between humans and robots would benefit if the expectations match the actual behaviors, robot behaviors. Indeed, the more the robot is seen as behaving in human-like manner according to its appearance in interaction, the more it resembles, also perceptually, will be considered close to humans. This happens because in the live interaction with robots, they occupy even physically as well as semiotically the space and the place which usually is occupied by another human, increasing the tendency to anthropomorphize its traits and to trust it as able to resemble humans more and more, starting from facial expressions. I think that I can say that this represents a proof which goes in our direction to say that the experiences we have in embodied interactions are fundamental for the concept of human likeness we adopt. On the other hand, there are implications concerning the role of human likeness in the investigation of uncanny valley effect. In the literature, indeed, strong cultural, gender, and age variability has been found regarding the uncanny valley. However, according to our approach, this variability is perfectly understandable if we consider the way in which different cultural, social, and individual instances interpolate to make up one's ecological interpretative capacity. The fact that we do not find the lowest common denominator to describe the uncanny experience based on the dimension of human likeness does not mean that this is an invented, vague, or obscure phenomenon to research. Maybe, as we tried to show, we are doing some mistakes in conceiving it. I want to conclude by proposing an experimental basis from which to assess whether the robot is considered human-like by the human individual. How then human likeness of robot faces can be assessed based on these new assumptions? In experiential cognitive semiotics, evaluating the human likeness attributed to a robot by a human means focusing on the conceivable practical effects this entails, thus looking at the bodily habits enacted in the case of positive attribution. We have seen that interacting with a robot considered to have a high degree of human likeness means enacting quite the same behaviors as in interaction with another human. In this sense, one of the main differences that distinguishes the way we behave with autonomous agents from the way we do with immobile objects is that for the former, there is a process of perceptual identification of the action goal. Indeed, one of the most adopted methodologies to investigate if others are identified as goal-directed autonomous agents is to observe the way in which someone looks at an agent while is performing a goal-oriented action. This methodology, often deployed to find mechanisms of attribution of intentionality in pre-linguistic children, relies on evidence about the link between anticipatory nature of gaze behavior and motor resonance mechanisms, the latter being indicated as the behavioral expression of the mirror neuron system. Basically, if the actor is bodily interpreted as a goal-directed agent, an anticipatory mechanism is triggered so that we shift our gaze from the agent to what we think is its intended goal. Based on this research, Alessandra Asciutti and colleagues wanted to test if the same gaze behavior displayed in front of humans can be found also in front of robots. So they monitored subjects' gaze during the observation of a humanoid robot performing a goal-directed action, and they found that subjects actually anticipated the goal and shifted their gaze toward action goal also in front of robot. The conclusion is that the humanoid robot is implicitly interpreted as a goal-directed, predictable agent able to evoke the same motor resonance as human actor. What I want to stress here is not that this is the precise experimental setting that we have chosen to be representative for experiential cognitive semiotics account. Rather, I wanted to shed light on the fact that new ways of assessing behavior and disposition towards robots are developing, which also support our vision on this topic. To conclude, these that I have outlined today are still research directions that I'm trying to follow, preferably from an experimental point of view. But let me just conclude as we began, that is trying to give a more complex answer to the question, why do robots have faces? This is because I think having faces, robots can enact what, in experience of human likeness, is given to each of us as exclusively ours. Thank you so much.